listeners, and welcome back. And a special welcome to our students, parents, and educators. You're listening to the podcast where we explore the latest educational trends, tackle pressing issues facing the education sector, conduct insightful interviews with people making a difference, and share stories of triumph and innovation from classrooms around the globe. If you're interested in all of this, then stay tuned. I'm your host, Lana the Educator, and today we'll explore a topic that's on the minds of thousands of Caribbean students right now, the CSEC examinations. Whether you're in Form 4, starting to prep, or weeks away from walking into that exam room, this episode will help you understand what CSEC is all about, how it's structured, and what smart strategies can help you succeed without the stress. So grab your notebook, headphones, or a comfortable spot because we're about to make CSEC make more sense. So let's start with the basics first. What exactly is CSEC? CSEC. That stands for the Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate. And before in the 90s, 80s, we might have just said CXC, the Caribbean Examinations, right? Is now it here meaning the CSEC exam is now an examination offered by CXC, which is the Caribbean Examination Councils, which was established in 1972, and it is typically taken at the end of secondary school. That's here in the Caribbean around Form 5 or grade 11 in some cases, where the students across the English-speaking Caribbean sit this exam. It plays a crucial role in determining the readiness for sixth form, which might be in some terms senior high school, or it determines your readiness for tertiary education and even the job market because some students don't go straight through to high school. So you can think of it as your academic passport. It acts as an exit examination for secondary level students, and the certification for this is used for employment and further education, such as the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Examinations, which we call CAPE, which is a 2-year course or any associate degree program. It is comparable to the O levels in the British system. This is our CSEC system I'm talking about, and it is recognized by regional and international institutions as a qualification for admission into other tertiary education schools. So CSEC, as we call it, offers a wide range of subjects. So you do have your core subjects like English language, which we call English A, and mathematics, maths. You may have a general science. In most cases, it is integrated science. And then you may have social studies. But our core and compulsory subjects here are English language and mathematics, and in some cases, literature or what we call English B. And then there are a bunch of other optional subjects. And the optional subjects vary by school and by student interests. So you have them classified in terms of the sciences, humanities, business, technical vocation, which we might call tech folk, creative arts, languages, and technology. And under sciences, students may choose to pursue biology, chemistry, or physics. Under the humanities, they may choose geography, Caribbean history, or even religious education. Under business, you have principles of business and principles of accounts, typically called POB and POA, and you might have economics. In the technical vocational areas, you have technical drawing, electrical, installation, building technology. And in the creative arts, you have visual and performing arts, you have music, theater arts. And in languages, we mainly do French and Spanish here, and more so Spanish. And then in ICT and technology, we have information technology, electronic document preparation, which is called EDPM, and management, EDPM. Now, students usually take 5 to 10 subjects depending on the school policy and the career goals. The students sit the Caribbean Secondary Education Certificate exam at either general proficiency or technical proficiency level. Some of us might remember when they used to do the basic proficiency level, which is now defunct. And so now it's just the general proficiency and the technical proficiency. And the general proficiency is the most common one that prepares students for further education. This is a proficiency level that emphasizes both theory and application, and it is graded from grade 1, which is the highest grade you can, obtain, to grade 6, which is considered basically a fail, but it's still a grade because grades 1 to 3 are considered passes. Under technical proficiency, this focuses more on skill-based and usually offered in technical or vocational areas like clothing and textiles or even electronic technology. And it's geared more towards students pursuing practical or skill-based careers. So this proficiency focuses more on hands-on skills and processes and vocational training. The CSEC exam is usually examined through school-based assessment, which we classify as SBs, and practical exams in addition to the written paper. So let's talk, and I'll talk more about the school-based assessments in a bit, but let's talk about the structure of the CSEC exams first. Because obviously knowing what to expect will really take the pressure off of you doing the exam. So the exam components are usually typically three key components. So you have your paper 1, your paper 2, and of course the SBA that I mentioned previously. In your paper 1, this is a multiple choice paper across subject areas, which is usually 60 items, and they test your knowledge across the subject syllabus. So the format might be, as I said, 60 objective type questions. Sometimes the number of questions vary by subject, but this is typically what you have. And the content covers the full syllabus in those 60 questions. And it focuses on, of course, recall, comprehension, and basic application. And this paper, in terms of time, usually lasts 1 hour to 1 hour and 15 minutes or so. And the scoring is done electronically, where each correct answer typically carries 1 mark. In paper 2, you have structured questions or essay type questions, and this is where you apply what you know. So it could be a problem solving type of essay, or essays, data analysis, depending on the subject. And the format is done in a way where you have several compulsory and or optional questions requiring written responses. And the content usually tests higher order skills. So you would get questions that more focus on your application skills, your analysis skills, your synthesis and evaluation skills. And these papers sometimes last from 1 hour and 30 minutes, which is rare, to 2 hours, 2 hours and 30 minutes, depending on the subject. So you can take a look here maybe at the example of recent paper structure and recent type of questions. You can pause the video here and maybe give your hand a try at recent exam questions and see if you're still sharp. So for English, for example, which is a compulsory subject, you may get a summary in the first section. You may get a comprehension in the paper 1. You get various comprehensions looking at a prose, a poetry, or dramatic piece in some cases. And then in your paper 2, it would be a summary, and now you would get some sort of expository in the second section. Then you get a short story, a descriptive writing, and then an argument to round off the exam. In mathematics, you might get some problem solving across algebra, geometry, and statistics, etc. And in business, you'll get case studies and scenario-based questions. So, of course, you may have been hearing about the SBAs. So it's a term once your child or once you are in senior high school or upper school, Form 4 and 5, you would be engaged in doing SBAs across the 2 years. So it's not just one, it's multiple SBAs you will have to be doing simultaneously because it is per subject in most cases over the 2 years. So this SBA or school-based assessment, you can think of it as your coursework because it's done in school over time and it counts towards your final grade. What it does is it tries to test, well, it tests actually real world application and research skills. So it is this internal project that is prepared by the student during the school year, and it is done under the supervision of the subject teacher, but they are moderated by the Caribbean Examination Councils. And the purpose is really to encourage research, to encourage critical thinking and real world application of the content, of the subject content. And it's usually weighted 20 to 30% of the final grade. It can be more for some subject areas. So, for example, in social studies, you might get a written report on a selected topic. In biology, you might have to do lab experiments and documentation. In POB, you might have to do a business plan. In English, obviously, you would have to do some research on some sources. They would have an oral component that you have to do and some group work to get your final SBA mark. Now, obviously, with CXC, there are private candidates who are not in school, and those who are not in school, meaning you may want to resit the exam, you're doing it after a couple of years, or you may just be a private candidate. They usually complete an alternative paper called an alternative paper 3 or alternative paper 3-2 instead of the school-based assessment. So in terms of scoring, the exams are marked by CXA trained examiners, and this usually, in most cases, made up of teachers in secondary school from around the Caribbean region. And most of the exams last, as I said, 1.5 hours, 2 hours and 30 minutes, 2 hours and 45 minutes. And the scoring is based on a weighted average of the papers and the SBA where applicable. Right? So the total examination duration, excluding the SBA, for most subjects would be, 3 to 3.5 hours total for papers 1 and 2. There are some format differences in terms of subject, that varies slightly. For example, visual arts is a practical paper and the exam is much longer, much more than 3 hours long. Modern languages may have an oral component and some listening papers that students have to do. And then in terms of the scoring, each paper carries a percentage weight. So for example, paper 1 might be 30%, paper 2 might be 50%, and the SBA might be 20%. And that will make up your final score, which is a composite mark based on all components. So CSEC grading system. The CSEC usually uses a numerical grading scale from grade 1 to grade 6, where you'll be awarded, those grades. So grade 1 is where you have a comprehensive understanding of the subject content, and that is considered outstanding. In previous years, we might have said, when you have a distinction, when you do exceptionally well. Grade 2 is general proficiency, where you have minor gaps in your knowledge, and that is considered good. Grade 3 is acceptable, showing that you have an acceptable grasp of key concepts, and that is considered fairly good. And grades 1 to 3 are usually considered passes at the CSEC level. Grades 4 to 6 show that you have limited understanding, and that is demonstrating limited achievement. So as I said, grades 1 to 3 are considered passes for further education and jobs. You also get, when you get your results, a grade report, and this grade report includes profile grades, and you get profile grades A to C for different skill areas, for example, knowledge, for your application, for your analysis. So when you get your grade and you see grade 1, you might have a profile of A or A, B, A, and things like that. But the overall percentage marks are not disclosed to students, but they are used internally by CXC for standardizing their scores. So what do you receive at the end of all of this examination that you're doing? So once you complete the exam, CXC sends you an official CSEC certificate. So what is the CSEC certificate? The CSEC certificate is an official document that is issued by the Caribbean Examination Council, which we call CXC, and it confirms the subjects a student has taken. It confirms their performance in each subject and their grade. And it is awarded to students who have completed one or more CSEC subjects, regardless of the number of subjects passed. And this certificate includes your name, your subjects, the grades, the proficiency level, the profile scores for things, as I said before, like knowledge, application, and interpretation. A point to note here is that the certificate is more than just a paper. It is the key to jobs. It is the key to scholarships and further education. So you have to make sure that you keep it safe. And to get this certificate, you have particular requirements. So you only receive the certificate once you sit at least one subject, but only subjects with grades 1 to 6 will be listed. And this is using Roman numerals. Usually you see it that way. So one of the requirements is that it is be recognized for employment or further education. So you would usually need at least 5 subjects, including English language called English A and mathematics with grades 1 to 3, to be able to seek employment generally. So when and how do students receive their certificates? These certificates are usually issued a few months after the results are released. So you typically get the certificate, not the result. You typically get the certificate in October to December following the May and June exams. So you would typically get this July, August, so you can prepare for registration into sixth form to do your CAPE, which some of us may formally have known as advanced levels or A levels. And these certificates are usually sent to schools for school-based candidates and to local ministries of education or exam centers for the private candidates. And they being CXC, usually post notices, and local ministries usually post notices in terms of when and where these results can be collected. So students can collect them in person, and you usually have to carry an identification to verify. Why is this certificate important? It's important for further education. As I said before, it is required for entry if you want to do the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Exam, which is going into sixth form, or community colleges and even into universities sometimes. It is important to use the certificate for employment because it acts as proof of qualification in job applications. You might need it for migration. It's needed to study abroad or for work visas. And it's also a form of permanent record. It's valid for life, so you should really keep it safe. Of course, there are other certifications like CVQ. Some might do a national exam in Form 3 or some examinations like that, like certifications. But CSEC exams are the main ones done. So CSEC is not the end. It is the beginning of opportunities, students and parents. So take a deep breath and focus on your goals and give it your all. Just some common tips here. I know many people have been waiting on their exams, waiting to do their exams, still in the midst of doing the exams. Some of you may have done some already, but you really want to avoid cramming at last minute. You have to set a realistic study schedule. Don't ignore the syllabus. You have to know exactly what you're being tested on. You have to avoid not looking at the past papers. So let me clarify. You really have to practice under real exam conditions. So use those past papers to help you along. Don't do weak SBA work. Don't copy. Don't focus only on ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a tool that you can use to help you do ethical and sound work. So you start early and revise. When in revision, you want to highlight keywords and plan before you write so that when you go into the exam, you don't misread the question, which is why it's important for you to practice, and many teachers engage in doing past papers. Of course, as well, don't neglect your well-being. You still need to eat. You still need to sleep, hydrate, breathe, and repeat. Use flashcards if you have to. Use your study groups if you have to make your learning more engaging. Talk to your teachers, right? Despite what you think they want you to succeed, they've worked with you, hopefully, for the 2 years there. And, balance is the key. So before we wrap up, I want to leave this with you. As I always say, you empower minds and you ignite curiosity. The journey you're on isn't just about passing exams, it is about your potential. So every late night, every past paper, every small win, they matter. And CSEC, you've got this one paper at a time. You've been listening to Lana, the educator. Remember, you empower minds and you ignite curiosity.